I did not come here to comfort you. I came here to hand you two numbers, a plan and a deadline. Napoleon Hill spent 20 years studying 500 of the wealthiest men of his era, and he found something almost every poor man and rich man shared in equal measure. Neither one was born knowing what he knows now. The difference was never the paycheck. The difference was always the plan. So sit down, get a pen, because in the next 4 minutes, you are going to do the one thing that 90% of people who feel broke have never once done in their entire lives. You are going to write down a number. Before we get there, understand why this matters more than it sounds like it should. The brain treats an undefined threat differently than a defined one. An undefined threat activates a low, constant hum of stress that never resolves, because there's no finish line to reach. You can't solve a feeling, only a fact. A defined threat, even a large one, activates a completely different response: problem solving. The moment "I don't have enough money" becomes "I am short exactly $412 this month." Your brain stops panicking and starts calculating. That single shift from feeling to figure is worth more than any budgeting app, because it changes which part of you is actually in charge of the decision. This is not a minor psychological footnote. It is the entire reason two people with the exact same income can experience completely different relationships with money. One lives in constant low-grade dread, the other operates with total calm, even under real pressure, and the difference is almost never the size of the paycheck. It's whether the situation has been converted from a feeling into a fact. That conversion starts now. The two numbers. Here is the truth nobody tells you when you're drowning. Vague anxiety about money is infinite. It has no edges. It follows you into the shower, into your sleep, into conversations that have nothing to do with money. It's infinite because it's undefined. And an undefined enemy cannot be defeated because you cannot even see where it starts or ends. A number has edges. A number can be beaten. So we start here, and we start with brutal specificity, because Napoleon Hill's entire philosophy hinges on one non-negotiable law. Nothing definite has ever been achieved without first being definitely defined. Not vaguely wished for, defined. Your survival number. This is the exact dollar amount that keeps your lights on, your family fed, your roof over your head, and nothing else. Not the number that keeps you comfortable. Not the number that lets you order takeout on a hard week. The number that keeps you alive and housed if everything else stopped tomorrow. Get out your bank statement right now. Not later, right now. Pause this video if you need to, and add up rent or mortgage, utilities, minimum debt payments, groceries at the cheapest reasonable level, transportation to work, insurance. Add it up. That is your survival number. Write it at the top of a page. For most people watching this, that number is smaller than they think. Fear inflates everything. When you actually do the math, the monster shrinks, because monsters live in vagueness and die in arithmetic. Now, the second number, and this is the one almost nobody calculates, because this is the number that actually matters. Your freedom number. This is not what you need to survive. This is the amount of monthly income, from any source, active or passive, that would mean you never again have to accept work out of desperation. It's the number where the word paycheck stops being a leash. For some people, this is double their current income. For others, it's less than they assume, because they've never separated the lifestyle I've been sold from the life I actually want. Write this number under the first one. Here is what most financial advice gets wrong. It treats these two numbers as the same number, just bigger. It doesn't tell you to survive better. It tells you to survive harder, on a bigger paycheck, in a bigger apartment, with a bigger car payment absorbing every gain the moment it arrives. That's not freedom, that's the trap with better lighting. Now look at the gap between the two numbers you've written. That gap is not an abstraction anymore. It is a specific, calculable distance, and a specific distance can be closed in stages. This is precisely where most people quietly give up before they even begin, because they look at the gap as a single enormous leap, something that requires one dramatic event, a windfall, a lottery ticket, a sudden promotion, to close in one motion. It doesn't work that way, and treating it that way is why so many people never start. Instead, divide that gap by 12. That's roughly what you'd need to close monthly over a year to fully bridge it. Look at that smaller number. For most people, it is dramatically less intimidating than the full gap. Often it's a few $100s a month, not a few thousand. That monthly figure is the number every remaining section of this script is quietly working to produce, from different angles, using different tools. Some months you'll close more than that figure, some months less. But the 12-month framing turns an overwhelming lifetime problem into a series of solvable months, and a solvable month is something a person can actually act on today, instead of freezing in front of a number too large to hold in the mind at once. You now have two numbers on a page, and a third number derived from them, your monthly closing target. Everything for the next 36 minutes is going to be organized around hitting that target repeatedly, using tools that don't depend on motivation to keep functioning, not vibes. Distance divided into months and closed 1 month at a time. The leak audit. Here is where definiteness of purpose stops being a philosophy and becomes a spreadsheet. Hill wrote that riches begin with a state of mind, definiteness of purpose, and very little or no hard work. People misquote that constantly. They think he meant wealth requires no effort. He meant the opposite. He meant that once your purpose is definite, the effort that follows doesn't feel like labor because it has a target. Effort without a target is what feels unbearable. That's the effort of working a full week and having no idea where the money went. So let's find out where it went. Pull up your last 2 months of transactions. I want you to find 3 categories, not 30, 3, where money is leaving on autopilot without a decision behind it. These are not the obvious ones like rent. These are the ones that have become invisible because they're recurring. Subscriptions you forgot you have, a food delivery habit that quietly costs more than a car payment, an insurance policy you've never once compared against competitors, a gym membership tied to a New Year's resolution from 3 years ago. The average person carries between 2 and 4 ghost subscriptions, services they are paying for and not using. That alone, for many households, is $50 to $200 a month, leaking out with zero benefit returned. That is not a moral failure. That is simply what happens when spending is automated and awareness is not. The company wants your money to leave your account without your attention ever touching it. Your job, starting today, is to put your attention back on every dollar that leaves. Here's the mechanism. Plainly, go through your bank and card statements, circle every recurring charge, and for each one, ask a single question. If I had to resubscribe to this today, would I choose to? If the answer is no, cancel it before you finish watching this video, not this weekend. Now or immediately after. Second, look at your 3 largest variable expense categories, usually food, transportation, and some form of entertainment or convenience spending. Don't try to eliminate them, renegotiate them. Call your insurance provider and ask for your loyalty discount. Most companies have one they don't advertise, and simply asking gets it applied more often than you'd expect. Switch one recurring grocery habit to a cheaper equivalent brand. Batch your errands to cut a weekly gas expense in half. None of this is dramatic, none of this is glamorous, but add up 3 corrected leaks, and you will often find $100 to $400 a month that was never actually required for your survival. It was simply flowing out because no one had asked it to justify itself. That reclaimed money doesn't disappear into extra spending money. It has one destination, which we'll set up formally in a few minutes. It becomes the first fuel for the gap between your survival number and your freedom number. There's a second layer to this audit that most people skip because it requires slightly more effort than canceling a subscription, and it's worth the extra 10 minutes. Beyond the recurring charges, look for what I'll call decision fatigue spending. The purchases that happen not because you wanted the item, but because you were too mentally depleted at the end of a long day to make a better decision. This shows up most commonly in food. It's not that people don't know cooking at home is cheaper. It's that by 7 in the evening, after a full day of decisions at work, the path of least resistance wins, every time, regardless of what the budget says it should do. The fix here isn't willpower. We've already established that willpower is a limited resource that shouldn't be the load-bearing wall of any plan. The fix is removing the decision in advance. The same principle will apply later to your income split. Pick one night a week, just one, to start, where a meal is prepared or planned before the tired version of you has to make a choice. A slow cooker started in the morning, 2 meals cooked in bulk on a day off. This isn't about becoming a different kind of person overnight. It's about removing one single decision point per week from the moment when you are least equipped to make it well. Do the same audit and remove exercise for any other category where you notice the same pattern: impulse purchases that cluster around stress, fatigue, or boredom rather than genuine need. You are not trying to eliminate every comfort in your life. You are trying to make sure that every dollar leaving your account left because you decided it should, not because a tired version of you was ambushed by convenience. This is what definiteness of purpose looks like, with a bank statement in front of it, not affirmations, an audit, followed by a system that doesn't require you to win the same argument with yourself every single day. The debt order. Now we deal with the second silent leak, debt, and specifically, the order in which you attack it, because most people get this exact decision backwards or never make it at all. There are two competing methods, and I want you to understand both, because the right answer depends on which trap you're actually in. Method 1. The avalanche. You list every debt by interest rate, highest to lowest, and you throw every spare dollar at the highest interest debt first, while paying only the minimum on everything else. Mathematically, this saves you the most money over time. If your debts carry high interest, credit cards sitting at 20, 25, even 30%, this method is not optional. That interest rate is actively working against every other financial decision you make. You cannot out-earn a 25% compounding cost with discipline alone. It has to be starved first. Method 2. The snowball. You list every debt by balance, smallest to largest, ignoring interest rate, and you pay off the smallest balance first, then roll that payment into the next smallest, and so on. Mathematically, this is usually slower and costs you more in total interest. But Hill understood something that pure math doesn't account for. Psychology is not a rounding error, it is the entire engine. If you have 5 debts and you're demoralized, paying off the smallest one in 6 weeks and literally deleting a bill from your life creates a form of momentum that a spreadsheet cannot replicate. Persistence, which we will get to later in this video, is often not built by the size of the win, it's built by the frequency of the win. Here is the actual decision rule, so you're not left guessing. If any of your debts carry an interest rate above roughly 15%, attack that one first, regardless of balance. The interest is bleeding you faster than any emotional win is worth. Once your remaining debts are all under that threshold, switch to the snowball and take the small, fast wins to keep your motivation compounding alongside your balances shrinking. This is not a philosophical debate. This is a decision you make once, on paper today. List every debt you carry, creditor, balance, interest rate, minimum payment, in one place. Circle the one you're attacking first using the rule above. Every dollar freed from the leak audit goes there, on top of the minimum, until it's gone. Then you roll that entire payment into the next one. This is what Hill meant when he said a decision, once made, must be adhered to with persistence. Not because the decision is sacred, because indecision is the actual enemy. A mediocre decision, executed consistently, will outperform a perfect decision you're still debating 6 months from now. There's one more piece of this that gets overlooked, and it costs people real money when it does: the phone call. Many people carrying credit card debt have never once called the issuer and asked for a lower interest rate. This sounds too simple to work, and yet it works often enough that it should never be skipped. Call the number on the back of the card, state plainly that you've been a customer for however long, that you're working to pay down your balance, and ask directly whether they can lower your rate or move you to a promotional rate for a fixed period. The worst outcome is they say no, and you've lost 5 minutes. The better outcome, which happens more often than most people expect, is a real reduction in the exact interest rate that's been fighting against every payment you make. The same applies to any loan with a variable structure. Call and ask what options exist for refinancing or consolidation, especially if your credit has improved since you first took on the debt. Do not assume the terms you signed originally are the terms you're stuck with forever. Financial institutions rarely offer better terms unprompted. They almost always exist for the person willing to ask. Make this call this week for whichever debt sits at the top of your list. It costs nothing to ask, and the debt order you just built becomes measurably easier to execute if the interest rate attached to it is even slightly lower than it was this morning. The second income decision. Hadsev. Everything up to this point has been defense, plugging leaks, redirecting existing money. Now we go on offense, because you cannot leak audit your way out of poverty if your income itself is the bottleneck. At a certain point, the gap between your survival number and freedom number cannot be closed by cutting a subscription. It has to be closed by adding a second stream. Hill's principle here is specialized knowledge, and it is one of the most misunderstood ideas in his entire body of work. People assume it means go get a degree or learn something entirely new from scratch. That's not what he said. He said general knowledge, no matter how vast, has almost no power for accumulating money. It's specialized knowledge, organized and directed toward a specific end, that produces income. The word to notice is organized. Most people already have specialized knowledge sitting dormant. They've simply never organized it toward a paycheck outside their main job. So here is the actual exercise, and I want you to do it in writing. List every skill you currently possess that another human being would pay for, even in a small, unglamorous way. Not your job title, your actual transferable skills. Can you write clearly? Can you organize a chaotic schedule? Do you understand a piece of software your employer takes for granted, but most people don't? Have you raised children and therefore understand childcare logistics better than most people who'd pay for babysitting? Do you cook well? Can you fix small mechanical or electrical problems around a house? Are you fluent in a second language? Have you built any kind of following, however small, in any online space? Now apply 3 filters to that list, because not every skill deserves to become your second income, and picking the wrong one wastes months. Filter 1. Can it start this month with the tools you already own? If it requires an expensive certification or 6 months of training before your first dollar, it fails this filter. Not forever, but for right now, this cycle. We are solving urgency first. Filter 2. Is there already a paying market for it? Proven, not hypothetical. Don't invent a market. Find one that already exists and enter it. If people already pay strangers to do this thing, that's your signal, not your imagination telling you it might work. Filter 3. Can you deliver it without your employer's time or resources? This has to be entirely yours, on your own hours, so it doesn't create conflict with the income you already depend on. Whatever skill survives all 3 filters, that is your second income decision, not 5 options. 1. Hill was explicit about this. Scattered effort toward many undefined goals produces poverty of a different kind, poverty of focus. Pick one. Commit to earning your first dollar from it within 30 days, not your first 1,000, your first dollar. The first dollar proves the mechanism works. Everything after that is scaling something proven, not hoping something unproven. Write the skill down under your freedom number. This is no longer abstract. This is the second engine. One warning, because I've watched this specific mistake derail more people than any other at this stage. Do not spend your first 30 days researching instead of acting. There is a comfortable illusion of progress that comes from reading about a skill, watching others succeed at it, comparing platforms, refining a business name, designing a logo, none of which has produced a single dollar, and all of which feels productive enough to quiet the anxious voice asking whether you're making progress. This is not organized planning. This is disguised procrastination, and Hill was unambiguous about the difference. A plan that never converts into action isn't a plan, it's a form of daydreaming with better vocabulary. The corrective is simple and slightly uncomfortable. Your very first action in this new skill should put you in front of an actual potential payer within the first 7 days, not the first 30. Post the offer. Message the first 3 people in your existing network who might need it. List the service on the first relevant platform you find, even an imperfect one. The goal of week 1 isn't polish, it's contact. You learn more about whether this skill will work from one real conversation with a real potential customer than from a month of solitary preparation, because the market will tell you things your assumptions cannot. If you make contact and no one responds, that's not a failure of you, it's data. Adjust the offer, the price, or the description of the problem you solve, and try again. But you cannot get that data by staying invisible. Visibility, even imperfect and slightly embarrassing visibility, is what separates a second income decision that actually produces income from one that remains a well-organized idea in a notebook for the rest of the year. The automatic split. Now, A hard truth about willpower. It is a finite resource, and every single day you rely on it to make the correct financial decision in the moment, you are gambling with something that runs out by evening. This is why the wealthy don't out-discipline the poor. They out-system the poor. They remove the decision from the moment of temptation and make it once, in advance, when they're calm and clear-headed, not at 11 p.m. scrolling a checkout page. Hill called the process of turning desire into achievement transmutation, converting an emotional want into a physical, organized action. Most people's desire for financial freedom never transmutes into anything because it never gets a mechanism. It just sits in the mind as a feeling, and feelings, unattached to systems, evaporate by Thursday. Here is the mechanism, and it takes 15 minutes to set up, one time, today. The moment your paycheck or any income lands, not a week later, the same day, a fixed percentage moves automatically before you ever see it in your spending balance. Most banks and apps allow you to schedule this as an automatic transfer tied to your pay date. If yours doesn't, a standing instruction to move funds the day after payday accomplishes nearly the same thing. Here is a workable starting split if you've never done this before. 10% to savings that you do not touch except for genuine emergencies, 5% directly toward the debt you identified in the debt order, and whatever surplus remains from your leak audit toward your second income decision. Tools, a course, initial materials, whatever it needs to actually launch. If 10 and 5% feels impossible on your current number, start at half that. The percentage matters less than the automation. A small percentage automated every single time will outperform a large percentage you mean to do manually and skip 4 months out of 6, because life gets in the way, and willpower has already been spent elsewhere by the time payday's temptations show up. This is the entire genius of the system. It removes the moment of choice. You are not white-knuckling a decision against a tempting purchase every week. The decision was already made, once, in a calm moment, and it now executes itself without requiring your willpower at all. This is what separates people who intend to save from people who actually do. The second group never has to intend anything twice. There's a subtler benefit to this that most people don't notice until months in. What you never see, you never miss. When money moves before it reaches your spending balance, your brain recalibrates its sense of normal around what's left, not around the full amount. This is the same mechanism that explains why a raise so rarely produces the financial relief people expect it to. The spending simply expands to match whatever balance is visible. Automating the split before that balance is ever seen quietly reverses this. Your lifestyle adjusts to the after-split number, not the before-split number, and it does so without any ongoing negotiation with yourself. If your income is irregular, commission-based, freelance, seasonal, the same principle still applies, adjusted slightly. Instead of a percentage tied to a fixed payday, set the split to trigger the moment any income arrives, in any amount, through any channel. The percentage stays consistent even when the income doesn't. This keeps the system functioning exactly the same way, whether you're paid weekly, monthly, or in irregular bursts, because the rule was never about the calendar. It was always about the money's first move the instant it exists. One final adjustment as your second income decision starts producing actual dollars. Apply the same automatic split to that income the moment it arrives, before it ever mixes with your primary spending account. Income that has never been felt as available spending money is far easier to direct with discipline than income that's already sat in your account for 2 weeks looking spendable. The mastermind ally. Hill's mastermind principle is frequently reduced to a motivational poster line: surround yourself with positive people, and in doing so, almost everyone strips it of the one thing that made it powerful: specificity of function. A mastermind, in Hill's actual definition, is not a friend group. It is a coordination of knowledge and effort between 2 or more people, in a spirit of harmony, for the attainment of a definite purpose. Notice the word definite again. It shows up in nearly every principle because it's the hinge the entire philosophy turns on. A vague support system does nothing for your finances. A specifically chosen ally, brought in for a specific function, changes outcomes measurably. Here is what this looks like in practice, because most people watching this are financially isolated, not because they lack people who care about them, but because money is treated as too private, too shameful, or too complicated to discuss with anyone, so they make every decision alone with no outside correction. Pick one person to bring into your financial life this month, chosen for one of three roles. The expert ally. This is someone with technical knowledge you don't have, an accountant, a fee-only financial advisor, even a knowledgeable friend who's already climbed out of the exact situation you're in. You don't need to hire someone expensive. Many communities have free financial counseling services, and credit unions often provide advising as a membership benefit most members never use. The question to bring them, specifically, here are my two numbers and my current plan. Where is the flaw you can see that I can't? An outside, informed eye catches blind spots that are invisible from inside your own habits. The accountability ally. This is someone at your same level, ideally also working toward a defined financial goal, who agrees to a short weekly check-in, 5 minutes, a text, a call, where you each report progress against your own numbers. Not vague, how's it going, but specific. I hit my automatic split. I made $40 from the second income skill. I paid the extra $100 toward the debt. Public. Repeated reporting changes behavior. This is not a personality quirk. It is one of the most consistently observed levers in human behavior change, and Hill identified it long before anyone had a term for it. The referral ally. Someone already inside the market of your second income decision who can shortcut your path to your first paying client or customer by simply introducing you, rather than you starting from zero visibility. You do not need 10 people. Hill's own case studies repeatedly feature small, tightly defined alliances, sometimes as few as 2 people, producing outsized results because the harmony and specificity of the pairing mattered more than the size of the group. Choose one. Reach out this week, not eventually. There is also a version of this principle that works in reverse, and it's worth naming plainly. The wrong alliance actively damages a financial plan, not through malice, usually, but through a kind of unconsidered gravity. If the people you spend the most time around treat financial ambition as suspicious, or treat spending as the primary form of belonging in the relationship, every dollar you try to redirect toward your plan will meet quiet resistance. A comment here, an invitation there, a subtle pressure to match spending patterns you're actively trying to leave behind. Hill called this the danger of drifting, allowing your environment, rather than your own definite purpose, to steer your decisions. You do not need to end relationships over this. You need to be conscious of the pull, and where possible, balance it by ensuring at least one relationship in your life is oriented toward the goal you've written down, rather than away from it. That's the entire function of the ally you're choosing this week, not to replace your existing relationships, but to introduce at least one voice into your life that is pulling in the same direction as your two numbers, instead of quietly pulling against them. Send the actual message today, not a mental note to reach out eventually, the specific text or email sent before you close this video. Keep it short and direct. Name what you're doing, name the two numbers if you're comfortable, and ask the specific question tied to whichever role you've chosen for them. A vague message like, "Let's catch up sometime," produces nothing. A specific message with a specific ask produces a specific reply, and a specific reply is what turns an intention into an actual alliance. Everything so far has produced pieces: 2 numbers, plugged leaks, an ordered debt list, a second income skill, an automated split, 1 ally. Now we assemble the pieces into a single document because scattered actions, however good individually, do not compound the way an organized plan does. Hill was insistent that a definite purpose without a definite plan is merely a wish, and a wish has never paid a single bill in human history. So here is the structure: 1 page, 3 milestones, each with a hard date. Milestone 1, day 30. This is your stabilization milestone. By day 30, your leak audit corrections are fully implemented, your automatic split is live and has processed at least 1 full paycheck, your debt order is finalized and the first extra payment has been made, and you've earned your first dollar from your second income decision. Not your first 1,000, your first dollar, proving the mechanism works. Milestone 2, day 60. This is your momentum milestone. Your second income has produced at least 3 repeat instances of payment, not one lucky sale, but a repeatable pattern. Your targeted debt has measurably decreased, not just been paid on. Your emergency savings has reached at least one full month of your survival number, so a single bad week no longer threatens the entire plan. Milestone 3, Day 90. This is your inflection milestone. You calculate the actual distance closed between your survival number and your freedom number since day 1 in real dollars, not feelings. You decide, based on real 90-day data, whether your second income decision should be scaled up, adjusted, or replaced with a better performing option from your original skill list. This is also the day you set your next 90-day plan, because this is not a program that ends, it's a cadence that repeats until the two numbers finally meet. Write these 3 dates on a calendar right now. Today's date included as day 0. A plan without dates is not a plan, it's a hope with better formatting. Hill's own definition of organized planning explicitly requires a schedule of accomplishment, and a schedule, by definition, has to name days, not seasons. One thing this plan deliberately does not include: a milestone that depends on circumstances outside your control. Notice that none of the 3 milestones say get a raise, or receive a bonus, or win new business unexpectedly. Every single milestone is built from actions you can personally execute, regardless of what your employer decides, what the economy does, or what luck delivers. This is intentional, and it matters more than it might seem at first glance. A plan that depends on external permission is not really a plan, it's a request, filed with the universe, waiting on approval. A plan built entirely from your own actions can be executed by you alone, starting today, without asking anyone for anything. If, when day 30 arrives, you find you haven't hit every element of the first milestone, do not discard the plan. Recalibrate the date, not the destination. Move the milestone back by however many days you actually need, and continue. The failure that actually derails people isn't missing a date, it's treating a missed date as proof the entire plan was flawed, when in most cases it simply means the original date was optimistic. Hill made a clear distinction between a plan that fails and a person who quits. Only one of those is fatal, and it's never the first one. The quitting point. I want to tell you something almost no financial video will tell you, because it isn't flattering and it isn't inspirational on the surface, but it is one of the most useful pieces of information in this entire script. There is a predictable week where most people abandon a financial plan. It is not week 1. Week 1 runs on the initial motivation of having just made a decision. It is not the final stretch either. By then, momentum usually carries people through. The danger zone is week 3 to week 4. This is the point where the novelty has worn off, the results are still too small to feel emotionally rewarding, and the daily friction of the new habits has become fully visible for the first time. Hill wrote about this exact phenomenon under the principle of persistence, and he made an observation that is almost uncomfortable in its honesty. The majority of people are ready to throw their aims and purposes overboard at the first sign of opposition or misfortune. Not because they lack the ability to succeed, because they lack a plan for the specific moment when motivation runs out and only the plan is left standing. So here is the rule, and I want you to write it next to your 90-day plan. Motivation is not required after week 2, only the system is required. This means your automatic split does not ask your permission in week 4. It already happened before you could talk yourself out of it. Your weekly check-in with your accountability ally does not check whether you feel like reporting. It happens because it's scheduled, and skipping it is now the abnormal action, not the normal one. Your second income decision does not require you to feel inspired on a Tuesday night. It requires you to have blocked a specific hour on your calendar where the only variable is whether you show up, not whether you feel like it. This is the actual antidote to quitting. You do not fight the urge to quit with more willpower, because by week 3, your willpower reserve is already thin. You fight it by having already removed as many decisions as possible from the moment of temptation, so that quitting requires actively dismantling a system rather than simply failing to start something new. If you feel the pull to quit in the coming weeks, and you likely will, because it is statistically the most common point of collapse, do not treat it as evidence the plan is wrong. Treat it as confirmation you have reached exactly the point Hill described a century ago, the point every single person before you also reached, and the point that separates the people who eventually closed their gap from the people who are still living paycheck to paycheck 5 years from now, having quietly given up around week 4 without even naming it as giving up. There's a specific practical tool worth building right now, before week 4 arrives, precisely because it won't be built in the moment you actually need it. Nobody designs a safety net while they're already falling. Write yourself a short letter, right now, addressed to the version of you reading it in 3 or 4 weeks, at the exact moment the plan feels pointless and slow. In it, restate your 2 numbers, restate why you started, remind that future version of yourself, in your own words, that the quitting point was anticipated, named, and already accounted for before it arrived, that this feeling was never a signal to stop, only a signal that you'd reached the well-documented middle of the process, the least rewarding and most decisive stretch of any plan worth finishing. Keep that letter somewhere you'll actually see it in a month, a note on your phone, a sealed envelope on your desk. The version of you who writes it today, with a clear head and real resolve, is a more reliable narrator than the exhausted version of you who'll be tempted to quit in 3 weeks. Let the clear-headed version leave instructions for the tired one, that is, in miniature, exactly what this entire script has been doing for the last half hour. Services before profit. Here is a paradox that Hill placed at the center of his philosophy, and it is the one idea in this entire script most likely to be skipped over by people in a hurry, which is exactly why I've placed it here, at the point where your plan is already built, and your instinct will be to focus entirely inward on your own numbers. The fastest route out of financial scarcity is rarely found by asking, how do I get paid more? It is found by asking, what problem for someone else can I solve better, faster, or cheaper than it is currently being solved? Profit, in Hill's framework, is not the goal you chase directly. It is the byproduct that follows a specific, valuable act of service, and chasing it directly, without the service attached, is precisely why so many second income attempts fail before they start. Apply this to the second income decision you made earlier. If your plan was simply, I will offer this skill, you have described a product, not a solution. Revise it into a specific problem statement, not I do bookkeeping, but I fix the specific mess that small business owners create in their books during their first year, when they're too busy to do it properly. Not I tutor math, but I get a struggling 9th grader's grade from failing to passing within 1 semester, with parents who are anxious about the SAT already looming. The version attached to a named problem sells itself in a sentence. The version that's just a skill has to be explained and justified every time. This reframe also solves a problem most people encounter before their first sale, the problem of not knowing where to find customers. People experiencing a specific, named pain are actively searching for a solution, in forums, in local groups, in conversations with friends. People offering an unnamed general skill are searching for customers who may not even know they need help yet. One of these is easy to find, the other is nearly invisible. This is also, quietly, the fastest form of trust building available to anyone starting from zero reputation. You cannot yet prove years of expertise. You can prove that you solved one person's specific, named problem, and that proof, a single testimonial, a single before and after, moves faster than any credential because it answers the exact question a new customer is silently asking, will this work for someone like me? Before you move to the next section, revise the description of your second income decision from a skill into a solved problem. This single rewrite, done today, will change how quickly your first dollar and your first repeat customer actually arrives. There's a second, quieter application of this principle that applies even inside your current job, not just your second income, and it's worth naming because it costs nothing and often gets overlooked entirely. If part of your freedom number gap is expected to close through a raise or promotion at your existing employer, that outcome is rarely produced by simply doing your assigned tasks competently for long enough. It's produced by visibly and specifically solving a problem your employer already knows they have, ideally one that's costing them money, time, or stress that they can name. Look honestly at where you work and ask the same question you just asked of your second income. What specific, named problem exists here that I am positioned to solve that isn't currently anyone's clearly assigned responsibility? Volunteering to fix that exact thing, not generally working harder, but specifically closing a named gap, is what actually produces the leverage for a raise or promotion conversation, because it gives you something concrete to point to, rather than a vague claim about effort. This doesn't happen by accident, and it doesn't happen by waiting to be noticed. It happens by identifying the problem before someone else does, and then solving it in a way that's visible to the person who controls your compensation. The reviewed ritual. A plan that is never reviewed decays the same way any unattended system decays, quietly, and usually without anyone noticing until the gap has widened again. So here is the final mechanical piece, a 15-minute ritual, once a week, same day, same time, for as long as this plan is active. Pick a day. Sunday evening works well for most people because it sits between the week that just ended and the week about to begin, with enough emotional distance from both to review clearly. Block 15 minutes, not an hour. 15 minutes, because a review that takes too long gets skipped, and a skipped review defeats its entire purpose. In that 15 minutes, check 4 things, in this exact order. First, did the automatic split execute as scheduled? This takes 10 seconds to confirm and catches errors, a failed transfer, an account change, before they compound into a missed month. Second, what is the current status of your targeted debt? Has the balance moved in the correct direction since last week's check? Not the whole debt list, just the one you're actively attacking, so your attention stays where the actual leverage is. Third, what happened with your second income decision this week? A specific number, hours worked or dollars earned or outreach made, not a feeling about how it's going. Vague impressions of progress are unreliable. A number written down every week for 90 days becomes a data set you can actually trust by day 90, rather than a hazy memory of, I think it's going okay. Fourth, is there anything this week that requires a message to your mastermind ally, a question for your expert, a report for your accountability partner, an update for your referral contact? If yes, send it before the 15 minutes ends, so it doesn't quietly slip to, I'll do that later, and then never happen. That's the entire ritual. 4 checks, 15 minutes, same day every week. This is what Hill meant by organized planning being maintained, not simply created once and forgotten. A plan is a living document, and the review is the only thing that keeps it alive rather than becoming, 3 months from now, a page you wrote once and never looked at again. There's a fifth element worth adding once the first month is behind you, and only once. Introducing it too early adds friction before the habit has even taken hold. At the end of each monthly cycle, alongside the weekly checks, recalculate the actual distance closed between your survival number and your freedom number using real figures from that month, not estimates. This is different from the weekly check on your second income's raw numbers. This is the compounding view, the one that shows whether the gap identified in minute 5 of this video is actually shrinking month over month, and by how much. Most people who abandon financial plans do so not because the plan failed, but because they never built a mechanism to see it working. Progress that isn't measured feels identical to no progress at all, even when real ground has been covered. The mind simply has nothing to compare against, so the current moment always feels the same as the starting moment. The monthly recalculation solves this directly. It gives you, in writing, unambiguous proof of movement, and proof of movement is the single most reliable fuel for continuing when motivation alone has already run dry, which by month 2 it usually has. Keep every monthly recalculation in the same place, the same notebook, the same document, so that by month 6 you have a written record of 6 consecutive proofs that the plan is working, not a hopeful memory of things feeling better, which is easy to doubt on a hard day, but impossible to argue with when it's sitting in front of you as 6 lines of actual numbers. The charge. Let me tell you exactly what has happened in the last 36 minutes, because I want you to see the shape of it clearly before I give you your final instruction. You have gone from an undefined, infinite anxiety about money to 2 specific numbers. You have found the leaks draining you without your permission and shut them. You have ordered your debts by an actual rule instead of by whichever bill felt loudest that week. You have identified 1 second income, filtered through 3 honest tests, and reframed it as a solved problem instead of a vague offering. You have built a system that moves your money correctly without requiring your willpower at the moment of temptation. You have named 1 ally instead of carrying this alone. You have written 3 dates on a calendar. You know in advance the exact week your motivation is statistically most likely to collapse, which means it can no longer surprise you into quitting. And you have a 15-minute ritual that keeps all of it alive instead of letting it decay into another well-intentioned plan that quietly died in a notes app. That is not motivation, that is architecture. Motivation fades by Thursday. Architecture is still standing in 90 days whether you feel like it or not, which is precisely why it works when motivation alone never has. Napoleon Hill did not study 500 successful men and find that they felt more inspired than everyone else. He found that they made decisions, wrote them down, and refused to let a bad week overturn a decision made with a clear head. That is available to you tonight. It costs nothing. It requires no permission from anyone. It requires only that you do not close this video and let the 2 numbers you wrote in the first 5 minutes sit untouched on a piece of paper, the way 90% of people who ever attempt something like this allow it to happen. So here is the one instruction, and it is the only one that matters tonight. Before you sleep, if you have not already done it while watching, calculate your survival number and your freedom number and write them where you will see them tomorrow morning, not next week, tonight. Everything else in this script, the leaks, the debt order, the second income, the automatic split, the ally, the 90-day plan, every single one of those steps depends on those 2 numbers existing first, in writing, in your own handwriting or your own typing, not in your head where vague things live and die without consequence. The distance between where you are and where you want to be has never been closed by a person who felt ready. It has only ever been closed by a person who wrote down a number, made a decision, and then simply refused to quit in week 4. I want to leave you with one last distinction because it's the one that actually separates everything you just heard from ordinary financial advice. Ordinary advice tells you to try harder, spend less, want it more. Every principle in this script has done the opposite. It has tried to remove the requirement for trying harder, wherever possible, and replace it with a structure that functions correctly, even on the days you don't feel like showing up. The automatic split doesn't ask how motivated you are. The weekly review takes 15 minutes, regardless of your mood. The letter to your future self was written by a version of you who was thinking clearly, specifically so the version of you who isn't thinking clearly in a few weeks has something solid to lean on instead of having to generate willpower from nothing. This is the actual, unglamorous secret behind every person who has closed a gap like the one you're facing. It was never that they wanted it more than you do. It's that they built something that didn't require them to want it every single day in order for it to keep working. You've built that same thing tonight, on paper, in the last 40 minutes. It exists now, whether or not you feel ready tomorrow morning. You now know exactly what to do. Go and do it.